microphone, video, everything. But of course, I'm going to do a little bit of due diligence and review what it looks like on a second computer. So,
Okay.
and I know it's not professional to be like, not exactly live at the very beginning.
I know. Well, I put out a message at a quarter to the hour saying, we're going to be live in 15 minutes or 16 or
Or is it,
19 or
okay,
somewhere around there.
okay. So it's not showing as live yet. I'm hoping it does go. And I'll actually go to the dashboard.
It's showing live.
You finding it?
Well, it's showing live.
Okay, we are live. Great. All right. So starting at this point, welcome everybody
Welcome. Good
to
evening.
our 8th show. It's been 2 months now. I guess we're basically have gone for 2 months. Basically, we've got a
8
week.
shows already. Wow.
8 shows. Yeah, and we're just barely scratching the surface. I
Oh.
feel like. I mean, we're just hammering through a lot of material without getting very deep into anything. I mean, to some things we're getting into depth, but here's our next shot at a technical issue-free show, and I think so far so good. Everybody's probably noticed my new backdrop. I'm in a new position here. I think some people thought the black background was a bit too spooky, and wearing black was also a bit too just sort of like a floating head sort of effect. I've also got a bit more of a buffer from the train. There's a train going by right now. I don't know if anybody can hear it. No?
No, I don't hear anything.
Excellent. We left off last week talking about a lot of interesting things. One in particular was talking about how we could get into or transition into a moneyless society, or a situation where the currency would be changing in terms of how it's looked at, right, and how we are
Right.
how we're perceiving and relating, and therefore transmuting the energy representation of value known as money. And mostly that's, to summarize, it is a representation of value. And the more that you find your own personal value, you'll note that money does not exactly escape you, because you are finding your own wealth as a person, being yourself. So, even regarding moneyless society transitions and whatnot, what I'm being told to share at the moment is that it is key first that we recognize our personal value as creator beings. It's like this coming into this awareness that money is actually sort of superfluous relative to your vibratory nature and ability to attract your reality onto yourself. That being said, money, government, they all have very grounded positions in our lives and are not exactly meant to just, disappear simply, by the wish of a genie wish or something like that. We are meant to evolve them. And so the suggestions that were given, the 6 suggestions or indications of what can be done, they were, if that's your focus, you can follow these trees and get a very effective job done quickly in your personal reality. Is it going to be my personal reality? I don't give that much attention to it personally, but I know a lot of people who do, and they're my friends, and I do share a lot of their loving insight, and perhaps we'll have them on our show sometime in the future, such as some of my friends that are ambassadors for Swissindo.
Right. Now, see, that was a surprise well, not so much a surprise, because I know that they've been around for quite a while, but I paid some attention to them in the beginning when I first heard about them. But it seems so over the top in many
Hmm.
ways that I really kind of lost focus on it.
Hmm.
And uh, and I remember the first time that I got really excited about the society going away from a monetary system was through the OPPT
Hmm.
and Heather
Yes.
explaining that,
Yes.
and that's what really changed my focus on the whole process, and saw that how possible it really is.
Um, yes, and you'll note where Heather sort of like left off with her involvement in the
Right.
discussions was you're the value,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and they talked about CVACs, which are creation value asset centers,
Right.
um, and they were basically to help people realize their value in their variety of ways, much like the idea of a contributionist society, which
Right.
which is a well fleshed out utopian concept. Um, it does relate to that, and yet CVACs were meant to be designed with our current technology as an exchange with numbers process, so that with numbers there's some sort of cataloging of value, and that would go forward. Um, and because many people do not necessarily trust each other, right?
Oh yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so because there isn't this natural connection that everybody has with each other, um, we find ourselves in a position where we want some sort of way of tracking things without us having to be on somebody's case. you know
Right.
we want sort of like a value so that we don't have to like track loans that we've put out and loans that we owe and all this sort of thing. We'd rather just some sort of like freedom of exchange and let some system just tell us how we're doing and where to give focus to when we need
Sure. Yeah.
to.
We don't want to have to barter for every little transaction that we
Hmm.
have to go through in our day,
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. Sure, I get it.
um, the other thing was that's coming up on this is this element of why money has come into play. Uh, a lot of people think of it as a sort of like a system for controlling, when in the past everyone sort of did favors in the village system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody
Mm-hmm.
just sort of cooperated, and you had this big community that support each other and whatever their skills are, which can still happen. But as you got empires growing and things like empires taking a part of your, a part of the responsibility of your life away, they couldn't track everybody. So they would just come up with a taxation system, right? So it's
Right.
like, I'm taxing you for the roads that we're building so that your community can run better, for protection, things like this,
Mm-hmm.
for aid in a given situation where it's bigger than just an individual or a couple individuals to take care of. You'd had somebody that was kind of running the system for helping people grow and get through their problems. So that's kind of what government sort of represented in a way, sort of taking care of the lines of connection between everybody, right? This
Right.
area where, like, I don't want to figure out what my neighbor is, but I want to make sure that he's not, doing meth and he's a danger to me or something, and I can't call police if I feel endangered, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, in this way, government has kind of stepped over the lines. I think many people will agree that they've stepped over their lines of responsibility, and in doing so have made us less responsible with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Many of us are. I mean, many of us are responsible when it comes down to a really important thing that matters to us, and we will step up and we will defend ourselves. But there's no sort of like hard and fast rule for what you should be standing up for yourself in and what you can let go. It's almost like everyone's trying to convince each other what everybody should be investing their time in. Like, should we focus on putting money into saving people with breast cancer? Should we be helping the children in Africa? There's a lot of different focuses, and nobody is in a full agreement of where to put all that attention. And so that's where each one of us is playing our own creator role, our own responsibility. And in that way, it begins to appear as if we are willing to take on things that the government has done for us and, you know, has given us a platform to work with, and to begin sort of finding ways of integrating that in our own way, and, you know, and stepping forward in our own power and sort of taking the reins. There are people who perhaps go off a very far direction with that, you know, talking about people that are like in a militia, you know, saying, you know, we'll defend the citizens even from the government, you know, things like this. And there's lots and lots of value with what government has put together already. So as a creator, each one of us is in a position for focusing on what has been working, putting together what we like, enjoying, you know, the creative process. And when I say enjoy the creative process, that is key. You know, you really only want things in your soup that are going to make it taste good, as far as you can tell. But whether experimenting with it or not is, you know, an in the moment choice. So with that in mind, you know, that's just a brief synopsis of where I stand and where those I'm connected with stand, as people are probably becoming more and more familiar who are new to the channel, that I'm connected with Pleiadians that speak with me telepathically and have telepathic telepathic experiences with them. And I'm also connected with a being known as Leonara, who identifies herself as the second emissary for the sun. She is an expert on lines of communication and interrelationships. So she has a lot of advice, and she's been giving us advice over the past couple shows. If you haven't caught on to that, and one of the things she did want to talk about today, should we just get into that?
Sure.
She wanted to get into the discussion of what empathy is from her point of view. She can only share it from her point of view, but she feels that it'll be really easy for us to sort of receive the context in which she understands it. I'm being told I understand it myself, like it's kind of, you know, a privilege of being me to have her in concert and have her in my life, sort of get to reflect on this. So I'm excited because I got a little bit of what she was going to share. I sort of got through, like, you know, the first 5 minutes of probably what I'm going to share, and then she's going to get into more elaboration. I wouldn't call it channeling what I do. I would call it just speaking up for an individual who, you know, can be, for all case and purposes, channeled by other people if they wanted to. So regarding empathy, it is an experience, first off. Many people call it an attribute of life, as in people have varying degrees of empathy in given situations and with different people. But it is foremost an experience. If you were to use empathy as experience, not an ability, and not a profound statement of a capability. Okay, many people say this person has no empathy for this. That means he does not have empathy within them. That is not true. Everyone has absolutely the exact same equal ability to have empathy right now. There is no privilege given to anyone else, and there isn't even any practice of empathy that is more. What are you trying to say? Okay, there is no one that, from this point forward, with this level of understanding, need to be considered more empathic than another. Okay, so it is a human privilege to experience empathy. And so a couple things she's going to say is explaining vibrationally examples of empathy that you may not consider empathy. Okay, empathy is foremost connection with an experience. Okay, which basically states that you are in tune with an experience. And when we have traditionally looked at empathy, we have described it as in tune with an experience that otherwise would not have as many facts to back it up. Which is like saying, I kind of know how you're feeling, man, without having a lot of facts to suggest that you would be able to do that, which gets into, you know, whether you identify with empathy from an energetic standpoint, like you identify an experience because you're sensitive to energies, and so that's why how you know how someone's feeling, or if you're sensitive to the cues of what someone's saying and their body language. Okay, that's not necessarily energy, but in terms of the way it's interpreted. So empathy is inclusive of both experiences, okay, of the subtle levels and of the more obvious levels. Like, you know, you're talking with someone and they decide to punch you in the teeth. You're like, well, that doesn't seem so subtle, but now you've got my attention, and I'm going to really try to figure out why that was and why that happened, right? And so we might say that is very, very blunt form of communication, but at the same time, empathy is almost like our listener self, right? It's that part of ourselves that is able to hold an arrangement of information, whether it's, you know, in our mind or whether it's physical, and observe an experience and make a decision and make an understanding. A lot of people believe that with empathy, we're seeing the facts. Like, I sense that you're upset, or I sense this and that, and I sense people's feelings. Well, in many ways, what empathy has been used in those contexts for, in terms of as a definition, is describing your energetic presence and relativity within another person. So when I say I empathize with you, that's because I'm kind of in your shoes. I kind of see you and me and me and you. Okay, and that's probably what the most traditional sense of empathy has been. However, empathy expands into the realms of sharing an experience, such as two people just having fun together, not speaking words, not talking about, you know, what's going on, and you don't even need to know what is in each other's heads. You're just assuming that by the mere fact that you're doing something playful, that you're sharing a vibrational experience with your heart, usually. So in the way that Leonara wants to expand the definition of empathy, and the reason why we'll be following at this point, the way she wants to expand our awareness of empathy is in this level where empathy can be both subtle and not subtle. Okay? So whether you're familiar with the subtle and you consider yourself psychic, or you have psychic abilities, simply reflects that you're putting more attention on the less obvious and subtler energetic standpoint. We could call it somebody who is a bit more, excuse the case, airy-fairy, a little bit more of a space cadet, can give a lot more value to the subtle information. And so they're using the term empathy to suggest that they're very connected, but they are very connected with very subtle sides of information, right? But at the same time, they could get punched in the teeth and they have no idea what's really going on, right? They have no idea why somebody would do that, because they cannot relate with that individual. Now, the other element of empathy is that, and many people might disagree with this, so I'm going to take my time in elaborating, is that what you are able to empathize in another individual, like the feelings you get, the sensations you get, that's a part of you. And what you miss is not really a part of you. Okay? And oftentimes in communication, it's about, you know, you're missing the point I'm trying to make. And yet the individual is still connecting with that individual exactly in the way that they share a common theme, right? Or a common energy in their personality. Let's just say someone had a child abuse story to share, right? And some people, they don't want to hear it. They're just like, I'm not even going to hear it. But those who do, they'll say, oh my gosh, you know, that's so sad, you know, tell me the story and, you know, go about it. And then as they tell the story, they can relate, like, oh yeah, I can really see that, and, you know, I can really, you know, feel for you. And this idea of feeling for the other individual is highly regarded, so they will do this. In our society, being able to listen and feel what another individual is feeling is a demonstration of being able to make a connection, of sharing an experience. At the same time, it is an in-the-moment co-creation, whether it's based on a fact of the past or the present or the future. You're sharing an experience right then and there. As in, I can empathize and I can feel what being abused as a child might be like. And the only reason why I can even have this discussion with you, Leonara is explaining, the only reason why you even come to a crossroads where you can be empathic about, you know, an experience is because it has some value to you in your life. What, you know, how you take that value is up to you. You know, does it have you reflect on your childhood more? Does it have you reflect on, you know, things that ought to change in your reality? Like, you know, you want to create reality. I want child abuse to be a non-factor. I want to absolve why, you know, it's happened in the past for me or for others. Oh, I believe I've lost my video. But I believe my mic is still there, right?
Yeah, your mic's here, or I'm hearing you anyways.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when viewing an experience where somebody is sharing, as in sharing an experience that they want someone else to share in, or whether they're doing it unconsciously and they don't want to share it, like hiding feelings, you know, like hiding where they really come from, and another's ability to be sensitive to both the obvious fact of what wants to be shared and the non-obvious. Leonara wants to explain that there's always like 10 to 100 times more details that you can get that are not necessary. Like they don't support the conversation and they don't support your present moment necessarily. And so in visiting a specific experience, take note and take stock of the present situation and exactly what is actually the subject at hand, because that is the most important part. Like you could say, wow, you know, let's talk about other parts of your childhood. Or we could say, wow, what did it feel like? Or wow, tell me about the abuser. Or wow, tell me about, you know, what that led for you and what you missed out in life on. Things like this. There's lots of tangents that you can explore, but exactly what's there in the present is where the meat of what you can get, and if you give it focus and try to understand at a deeper level. You may not be able to, but the experience is there for you to go into it in a deeper, richer way. Now, one of the reasons why, well, there's two reasons Leonara is explaining why she feels that this deserves to be explained a little bit. But before that, she's opening up in case you want to have a question or in case the chat room wants to ask questions up to this point. Did you have any comments, Don?
No, I guess one thing that I got out of it though is that just the mere incident of having the conversation and the communication, whether you agree with it or whether you're on opposite ends of the spectrum on an issue or what have you, that it's still an empathic sharing of communication.
Yeah. It's communication, and empathy is basically describing, from what I'm getting now, I'm speaking for myself, is basically describing your connection. And you have a connection with someone else, and they may not have the same connection with you. It's your connection with the other individual, not necessarily both ways. Right? So I can only share, like, you and I like chocolate cake. I may like the icing. You may like, you know, the main dough part of it. We both like the cake. We're both talking about the cake, but each one of us has their own preference in terms of, I wouldn't even say preference. Preference is probably not the right word. It's probably more along the lines of where we're putting more focus.
Right. But so you can okay, for example, let's take the political scene right now. You can take a crowd watching Bernie Sanders speak and a crowd watching Donald Trump speak.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in before this discussion with Leonara tonight, I might take the standpoint that in the Sanders crowd, I see more potential compassion because that's where my feelings would be, and that there would be more empathy there.
Mm-hmm.
But because that has more meaning for me than what might be happening in the crowd of a Donald Trump speech. And yet, from what she's saying tonight, is that there's as much empathy in that Trump crowd because
Correct.
they are sharing an experience that's totally different than what the Sanders group is sharing. And yet, the basic emotion and the basic experience is one of empathy.
Yes, it's the same process. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
connecting with another individual. And in the case of that, the individuals in the audience connecting with each other and sort of like, have that sort of the crowd energy wave that, that's fulfilling and feeling a part of something that feels very wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, experiences, as you're aware, if repeated, can become a part of the subconscious and therefore can be basically embedded. So if you were to go to a Donald Trump, let's just say that's not the individual you would prefer to hang out with between Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders, if you were to spend more time there, you could easily become a Donald Trump supporter by being a part of the experience.
Exactly.
Right? So, and this happens with people who move into different areas of the planet, different locales, different communities, different cultures. They begin becoming like the local experience and the local mentality and the local, thoughts and feelings that are shared in that space and time. So I'm gonna go on to share why the two reasons why she felt that this was important to bring up today. And then she said she'll give us the rest of the show to talk about whatever else we want to talk about. The first element is to respect empathy and the emotions that follow the empathic experience, whether observing it or being the one that's experiencing empathy oneself. Respect it as an energy that is all of itself, as an experience that is all of itself. In this way, we're not calling something right or wrong except for our interest in following that experience. So, in another way, no one's empathic interpretation is incorrect. It is just up to us to be a part and follow that empathic interpretation on our first hand. So we can get into what someone is sharing, right? And say, oh, I love what you're sharing. I love what you're sharing. Or we could say, yeah, that's nice, but I'd rather talk about other stuff. And leave it as it may. It is an experience that is essentially how individuals share with one another. Okay, you can have a lot of empathy for someone, and you don't tell them. Like you could fall head over heels in love with somebody, and you won't tell them. And just like that high school crush element, where you're like, oh my God, it would just absolutely tickle me if the other person noticed me, right? Because that would mean that they're sharing the experience, no matter which way, because there's many ways to look at the experience: good, bad, wrong, right, loving, hateful. You can interpret it your own way, and generally, that's a sticking point that people have had with the definition of empathy, because empathy suggests that people who are sharing the same experience would have the same feelings on the subject. And that is not necessary.
Right.
As an experience versus an emotion that everyone is feeling, it is not assumed. Well, it has been in past by the old definition, but by this elevated definition, it is an experience. Now, I'm going to take a sideline before we get to the second point. She wants me to address what many people would probably have gotten to this point in the conversation who are having difficulty following. I've probably come to the point where they're expressing this point of view that says Julien is advocating for not feeling and just treating everything as an experience, and that feelings are not a form of direction within our lives. Well, they are. I'm going to point out that treating something for its non-emotional context is not what we're here to do. We are here to decide, and we are here to follow what feels good for us. So empathy, like any experience, is decided upon based on the value that you see in the emotional context. Mm-hmm. So if you want to follow the good news, you follow the good news. Generally, that is where many people want to be. They want to follow the uplifting experience, and they may, and they'll join other people who have a lot of ability to share in that uplifting experience. Sometimes people want to explore in empathy an uncomfortable experience, and they're driven to say, save the animals, support PETA, whatever, And in those directions, I'm not suggesting that you don't do that either, that you don't, follow a negative experience. Oftentimes, there's some really profound, beautiful experiences that come off of exploring a negative subject, from one point of view, right? Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, negativity is a springboard for great love, right? Oftentimes, we push against something to find out exactly where we're really headed. Like saving the animals builds up your love of animals, and gets you having a much more visceral connection with animals versus people who are not saving the animals, perhaps. Mm-hmm. So there's sort of like there's good and bad and right and wrong and feeling good and feeling bad in every possible experience, and everyone is having their own view of it in their own personal way. So I'm not advocating for the fact that an experience, empathic experience, is just experience. It is touched with emotion, and coming forward, I would suggest being more discerning allows you to follow your heart a little bit more, either by going down the rabbit hole in negativity and finding out what it's really about, or saying, I see that there's something negative here, and really I don't want to have that much more to do with it. I would rather
I've got that negative T-shirt already, so I'm moving on.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to move to Leonara's second point of why she's sharing this.
Well, it's kind of a little touch on a little bit with the last part. Because I think what we do is we get into this feeling that, especially when we're working with groups of people, because you do get that group empathic what mode of thinking, the group thought, right. And we can almost find it easy to think that the group that is 180 degrees divergent from us is not feeling, is not empathic, because it's something that's very opposite. You can take, I use the Sanders-Trump thing. You can talk about carnivores and vegans. You can talk about all kinds of different, very opposite, polar opposite
points of
topics.
Context. Yeah.
Yes. And the point, I think the point there is that that the energy, the empathy that's there is the same. It's just expressed in a very different way.
Yes. As a term of empathy.
Yes.
As a term. But yes, everybody is still following their passion in that moment. And
exactly.
And the point in point one that she was making was that a repeated experience, or this wasn't in point one, this is just a point she was making. A repeated experience means you're going to experience it. Mm-hmm. Okay? So if at the onset of an experience you say, drop me off at the next stop, let me off this crazy train. I don't want to get involved in, being at the Bernie Sanders caucus or, the Donald Trump one. Allow that to be. Find a way to respect moving on. And that's what her second point is about, is not to get into this position that so many people do, which is saying, why don't you think this is important? Why this is, of course, very important. Of course, it's very important to the individual making the point.
Right.
But there's a lot of judgment of other individuals who don't share what they're calling feelings. They're saying you don't have feelings for the animal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's true, but I just don't have as much time given to getting invested in the experience of animals in harm. Okay? So many people use empathy to suggest that people don't have emotions that they should have. When in fact, the first point that Leonara is making is that everybody has the human emotional spectrum. Mm-hmm. They just are exploring it in different experiences per their purview as a human being. And judging an individual as a human being for not choosing the same experiences is basically a place where you're not fully comfortable with the decision that you've made, whether you're conscious of it or not. So if there's something you need to make someone do to fall in line, that's because you believe that you need their support when you don't. As an individual creator being, you do not functionally need anyone else to come into line. You just need to find those that are in alignment. And that's how it works. And you'll continue to find them. You may think there's only 2 people in the world that share, the idea of what Bernie Sanders is into, but in fact, no. You'll find anybody who fits the bill if that's what you're attracting.
Sure, that's the law of attraction.
Through a repetition of focused on an experience.
Exactly.
So, that being said, I think that sort of wraps up the basic concepts there. Obviously, we can go into discussing lots of different applications of what we just shared, but for the moment, we'll let it rest, and and we'll move on to other subjects since we're down to our last 20 minutes or so. Did you want to talk about anything particular, or what we talked about before the show, or what?
Yeah, I think what we talked about before the show. We had a couple of days ago this. What's being called a bombshell release of information, the Panama Papers. And while I don't know that it's really all that important to get into the specifics of what's in them and what's not in them, energetically and just our movement through this time right now. This is if we can talk about the where this is going, why this is showing up, and what the next steps along the path might look like.
Right, absolutely. Could you do me a favor though and give a brief description for people who's never heard of it? Just a real brief.
Yeah, the Panama Papers. Apparently, there's a large law firm in Panama, and the many documents. I guess Edward Snowden called this the largest release of concealed information ever, was released, and it's slowly getting out into the public. The Prime Minister of Iceland had to resign because of information that was released in this, and it's about his was about offshore money. So it's we're getting back to the money thing, and playing out in that way. And so it's supposedly the documents are on the one hand being coerced by the media to kind of protect the top 1/10 of 1%, but I have a feeling that is not going to last for very long, and it's going to bring about more documents being released too. So it started in Panama.
Okay, so essentially it implicates a lot of individuals, mostly, and records. So lots of, I'm assuming, records that create redundant information so that it's sort of like seen in multiple ways, the same information, and sort of patterns, I suppose, for certain people's behaviors.
Exactly.
So what I'm getting is actually going to come from who Don and I understand as the council, in terms of their interpretive think tank sort of ability on what they see coming out, without sharing too much stuff that would just make this a really long conversation. So maybe Don, you and I, we can do a separate conversation just on this subject alone.
Sure.
But we'll get down to the very basics of what they're sharing with me. And in fact, we're going to be speaking with somebody that I don't know if you and I have talked with in this council. It is a Mantis individual.
No, we have not.
He's going by the name Tranid, or Tranid, which is short for a lot more syllables and consonants that follow.
Thanks, Tranid.
Yeah. He looks like a reddish-brown praying mantis type of individual.
Okay.
He says, "Don't let this frighten you, just like you come to love the insects on your animal planet." He is a researcher, and so he does a lot of the gathering information sort of side of working in the council, and he gathers a lot of information from records that are public and information that are records are not public. So this is very similar to the kind of work that he does, this sort of gathering useful information and doing research. And in this specific situation, he knows a great deal of what he expects are patterns of what will follow in with this. And so that's why he's sort of joining us in this respect. He's not a big communicator. He mostly just informs the council with records and highlighted documents and stuff, because his research gets very detailed, and all he does is try to highlight the important bits in case you want to get more involved. And what he's saying is when he's seen information like this occur in other environments and other situations, essentially, he looks at this as a deliberate attempt by people who are outside of the records of sort of like throwing meat to the dog that's chasing it, right? So this is kind of like another expression is throwing somebody under the bus.
Right.
Okay. So this information was developed and created and brought together with all the best intentions, but is still led by sources that want this information to come out to protect themselves. Okay, so it's sort of like give the dog something to chew on while I can make a runaway escape or a getaway. So in this environment, he knows that this is almost always the situation. Given the specific details that have come forward in this one, he wants to say that he actually believes it's completely accurate. There's a lot of energy within that firm. There's a lot of people getting fired in that firm. There's a lot of people who are getting kudos. That firm is not going to function the way it has any longer. It's basically turned into a different kind of beast. And at the same time, there is a degree of pressure going on in the background for getting down to the sources and sort of like following the trail for the sources. And so that's going to play out for some time. But the clear implications that showed up in the first place is that a lot of people need to resign, and a lot of people need to basically prepare their speech for their explanation of why. And so the resulting after effect is that everyone's preparing their exit speech, sort of like their resignation speech. The person in Iceland, he must have been already ready in many ways, right? He already saw the writing on the wall and said this is going to happen,
Well,
And
yeah, they had huge protests in Iceland, so that
mhm.
that was also part of it. I mean,
Right. And
that's a
Iceland's
crap.
very awake, right? Very
Yes, they have.
awake to grander, you know, grander experiences that people are understanding as, how would you say, the complex mess that is the New World Order, machine or something like that.
Yes.
So they have more insight into corruption, more insight, and are basically keeping the officials in Iceland like on their toes.
Hmm.
And you'll note, if the Iceland fellow, had an argument to suggest in his defense, he would. But
Hmm.
you'll note he did not have a defense because he would be in a position where he'd have to basically say everybody is following the same defense. And his personal defense is nobody cares about the personal defense,
Right.
right? Nobody cares about his personal life. They just care that he's a part of a bigger problem. And so, shoo, get out of the way.
Yep.
Don't let you be part of the bigger problem anymore. So when I'm saying what Tranid is saying, excuse me, with regards to what's expected, it's expect a lot of exit speeches to be written up and be written out, and a lot of communication behind doors and saying, let's try to do ourselves a favor here and go out, winning somehow. And
Hmm.
so there's going to be a great opportunity in this space. You as creators watching this, you can choose this at this point. Are the individuals implicated going to work together and try to solve the mess by becoming like insiders or whistleblowers of their own nature, even though they've been called out? Are they going to
Hmm.
go along and be sort of like an insider? Are they going to go along? Well, they probably won't get to be an insider anymore into their own world, but will they basically have a great deal to share on the inner workings of this system? Like, we're seeing the papers, but let's talk about the emotions. Let's talk about the drives that people are feeling here,
Exactly.
and understand how this machine was put together through a concept of manipulation and self-preservational, fear-based mentalities. As
Hmm.
that is what the pyramid essentially stands for, is using fear to beget a process of manipulating people into action, right? and
Right.
and preying on people's inner desires, where the desires are simply to not have fear, right? So it's like, give somebody money and have all this money so that they can omit fear. Well, fear is always going to be there, right? You can always pull some fear button no matter how rich you are or how
Hmm.
privileged you are or what status you have. Fear is a natural process of a growing individual, because a growing individual grows from fear, right? They
Hmm.
expand and they choose and they develop and they have a life experience based on fear, because fear is the polar opposite of who they are, meaning they find out more who they are when they can find a way there.
Hmm.
So pure, fear can often be sort of like, like a viaduct, or, a guiding, aquifer that guides the emotional spectrum in a direction that's more fruitful. Or there's people who get lost in fear too.
Yes.
Yes. Um, so, did you have any comments or questions for Tranid on this subject, or anything really at all? It can be any subject, since he's present with us at the moment.
Yeah. Um, not really right now.
He's asking if you would like to put him on assignment to research something that he can gather for us for the next show. If there's any particular questions of a greater, more in-depth nature he can get into,
Wow.
um, he can put some time aside for that.
Okay. Yeah, let's look at that. Chat room, help
What
us
what
out
what
here.
what kind of questions would you like Tranid to research? Perhaps on the subject, like we've been talking about, the Panama Papers, or anything that fits in the
Well,
lines of doing research behind the scenes.
for example, one piece of information that came out is speculation that Vladimir Putin
Mm-hmm.
is now, because of the Panama Papers
Mm-hmm.
being released, has is seems more willing to release some even higher profile papers that will actually have the names that are the world leaders, as opposed to the ones that were maybe listed in the Panama Papers.
Okay.
So
Tranid does have a comment on that, but you go
okay.
ahead and finish.
Yeah. So the point being is that we seem to not only have people desiring, aware of this information and desiring to get it out, whether it is to protect themselves or just because of a moral sense of what's right or what have you. And we seem to be getting more outlets available to it. So it just seems to me that this is it's like the fireworks show starts out. There's a few here and a few there, and then all of a sudden there's a few more, and there's a few more, and then boom, there's the grand finale, and it just lights up the sky. And it seems to me that this is the process we're doing.
Right. For some people, it's more obviously fireworks than for others. Perhaps
Yes.
people who have been looking for something like this for years would see this as, a really big firework example of progress that they might have been following up to this point. Talking about Swissindo or OPPT, those are probably like, in their own ways, starting of fireworks. But in this way, this can be a strong introduction for people who are just coming to the show and sort of exploring this concept at this point.
Right.
What Tranid wanted to say regarding the other point in terms of what Vladimir Putin's reaction and likely direction that he would be going from Tranid's point of view, even though he's a mantis, he's very human. So he's very he's very into human species and whatnot. In fact, he left his people because they were too negative and too mechanical. He has those capabilities, but he really enjoys the essence and the strength that the human character has within it, to transform and to change and not live 1,000 years and eat the same meal every day the way his homeworld does. So what he's saying is that he does expect Putin to make his own sort of explanation for things coming forward, much like sort of like building up his platform for sorting out exactly how he wants to say it and what he wants to say. He's saying that everything that Putin does is extremely calculated.
Right.
Okay. Everything that Tranid can say from his point of view is that Putin is in contact with extraterrestrial intelligence or extraterrestrial guidance. Okay? Everything is suggesting that he has a paranormal ability to pivot and make decisions in a timely manner. At the same time, it's clear that they are not living with him or in his premise, because he does make a lot of decisions in a bold way that does not suggest a lot of thought has gone into it or a lot of intel has come forward in the process. So he has incidental extraterrestrial or special influential information to work with, and he believes that just like this council is in this position to speak on a subject, they believe that he not only was a part of this information coming out in the first place, but he's integral in terms of taking it to the next level. But the one piece that's missing before he goes to that stage is, are people going to take the Panama information, or is it going to be, shushed under the carpet? If it doesn't get shushed under the carpet, he will make his presentation.
Tranid, do you feel that that Putin, though, is actually maybe playing a dual role? That he has, if he went all forward without doing some of those Russian presidential things, that he could be replaced and therefore not be able to get anything done. And I think that's a big thing that's happened with Barack Obama also, is that he's had to do certain things because of the position he's in, while trying to also play a different role in the evolution of the planet.
Okay, there's 2 points there. One is him
Mhm.
being replaced, and then the other element in terms of the bigger picture of the evolution of the planet.
Right.
But first, he wants to say, regarding Putin and also the idea of Obama being replaced, that can only occur when there is a passionate interest in an experience where they are replaced.
Mhm.
Okay, so if Putin does not have the support of 50% of his countrymen, then he gets replaced. It's energetically a foundation of how it works. Okay, same thing with like voting people in. You're supposed to have 50%, interested in you at least, or a majority.
Right. Right.
So 50% is energy-wise, which means you can vote for the other guy, but you can still support him in these areas. So we're talking
Right.
about an amass of energy that is not just I vote him and I'm fully behind him or not. It's on the subjects that matter to me. And so that energy is nigh impossible to measure from a regular human standpoint. It can only be, apparently it can be measured, and the Pleiadians have the technology for reading light essences and reading vibrations, like
Right.
reading heat signatures. They're able to do that with people's different states of mind, and they can actually gather a subject in queue and have like a readout telling everybody exactly what the readout says, and therefore can make predictions based on that. And at the moment, Putin is more than 68% supported by his fellow countrymen.
Okay.
So he's not in a position, he is in a position that if he did something here, that he could change that immediately. So depending on his presentation, and if he's supported with the intelligence that it's being suggested that he has, he will increase the strength. He'll only take steps forward that will increase his strength as a leader. So whatever he shares will be in that respect. Note that this leadership is not synonymous with respecting the Western culture.
Right.
Okay? So it is in this way that Russians feel that they deserve an independent purview on Western culture, and their personal decision is not affected in terms of how they're received. Like, they don't care that they're called, American haters or something like that.
Right.
They really don't care. They're passionate enough because they believe in their position, and they believe in the way that Putin has this sort of, stand up for yourself, be blunt, perhaps be abrasive if you need to, and stand your ground and stand what matters to you, whether that's completely different for, millions and billions of other people. It does not matter. And in this way, it's reflective of supporting your personal experience. It's supportive of saying, this is what I want, and I'm going to shoot for this, right? And so that has a boldness and a courageousness that Putin is a strong example for. And that's
good.
and that's a quality that many people desire. But the Russian culture in general is very supportive of that approach, of being bold. Standing in your own and sort of standing up for one's personal values. It's not even the values that are being shared. It's more the idea that you're standing up for your personal values. So they like Putin in many ways as a character, not necessarily what he's going for. And so the support for him is in that way. And so for that reason, he is a good example and is able to be idolized as a character of portraying that level of strength and getting into the intelligence behind his emotions. He does always speak from the intellectual side after he's processed his emotions, Tranid is saying. So he's never completely impulsive except in small settings, small recorded environments and things like that.
Right.
There's one more point that he wanted to make, noting that we're sort of up on time for today. And that is, he is still hoping you'll pick something out for him to research.
I will.
Okay, and you can tell me. It doesn't have to be during this live session unless you have an idea.
No, I don't. But I'll get something for Tranid. But he can monitor me too, and
okay.
We'll come up with something.
He would like about a 3 days notice.
Okay.
So this is basically coming up with something by Saturday or something.
Sure.
1 minute. Was there anything in the chat room that I missed? I'm sorry. I was not following the chat room. I want to make sure that I'm not missing out anybody's questions.
Well, yeah, here, Rena has Julien and Don. Does that include the energies from around the world or their own people only? I think she's talking about the Russians. I asked because so many Americans support Putin as well.
Well, that is in the same reflection of Putin as a character and standing
Right.
up in a courageous way, of course. Of course. But the question I believe she's asking is if the readings involved him staying in power because Russians were giving him the energy. No, this is actually much more. Russians have a lot more influence on the say,
Right.
but
Right.
but Americans do have some influence, but they don't have as much influence. So let's just say the average ratio is it's about one Russian's energy for the subject is about 3 times or 2.5 times as strong as someone who's not living in Russia.
Right.
Okay. So you can be passionate for Putin, but you're not going to have the same energetic say for his holding his position as those living there.
Right.
By about by about an influence of 1/3. Now there are places that actually support Putin more than some of the most excited Americans. And they are from other somewhat communist-like countries. They will support a strong figure, mostly because he encompasses a degree of divine masculine which is somewhat more evolved than divine masculine on a world scale. For the world scale.
Maybe I got a question for Tranid. Maybe he can. Yeah, I'll make it quick because I know we're out of time. The elections, especially the presidential elections, since 2000, there's been a big controversy as far as the voting machines moving to electronic voting, and there's been a lot of calls for vote rigging and irregularities in the voting system. And I know there's some of those that have nothing to do with the machines themselves and the vote counting. But as far as that's concerned, it is the difference in the vote totals and the perceived vote totals, is that all physically done, or is that energetic component that you were talking about before, did that help get Bush elected as much as maybe rigging votes in Ohio and Florida?
Okay, the energy is always going to be the winner. So,
Okay.
so the closer you get to working with energy, the more you actually have the potential under your feet to make a change and to affect change. Okay, so even with the energy, let's forget rigging machines and whatnot.
Right.
The energy alone can make you get to where you want to be. Okay.
Exactly.
Now, so, and the practiced experience is another way of. Remember we talked earlier about practicing the experience. That gathers energy, and that energy, or we can also say and put it in another direction, that puts you into the world in which that energy is more amassed. As in, you move to the dimension or the timeline or the reality in which that energy is more coalesced and more strengthened. So you're always moving between, which president's going to be, up until you call it, I have to have made a decision by now because this is the voting time.
Right.
But you can even say, like in the case of Al Gore, we still don't know, how long is the counting going to go? And you can still keep making a decision.
Okay.
And so in many of our world, well, everybody I'm speaking with is in my world, okay?
Yes.
We saw it as, this has taken some time to count it all up. You see? So we were in that position where, which reality are we actually giving more attention to? And so which candidate is getting our attention more and more and more? And that's what campaigning is. It's just getting people to practice the thoughts you want them to practice in order for you to win.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and of course, you're only talking about the good points, or you're pivoting all the negative points. As much as you can keep things positive, people are going to follow the positive. You could talk a negative game, but you'll never get the votes for it because this is not a negative world. It does not function purely on negativity. It focuses on diverting positive energy into a direction that is useful from our point of view.
Right. And that also gets back to what Leonara was talking about at the opening of the show as far as the empathy. Because even though a candidate may be saying something negative in my perception, the people that are identifying and actually part of that communication are empathizing with what that candidate is saying. And therefore, that's a positive energy for something that I would consider negative.
Right. Well, just to be clear, Leonara is explaining that there's negativity and positivity, and there's positivity and negativity.
Right.
Right. It's very it's a very mixed up bag in the human world. Things are very like Santa's bag. You don't know what you're going to pull out just by putting your hand in and seeing what you're going to get. You have to have the intention for what you're going to pull out if you want to focus on one area or another. Okay. So with that in mind, if people are already identifying with something as positive or something as negative, you can work with their sense of empathy and pull their strings. Okay? And that can be through manipulation, or that can be through an invitation in transparency. Right? Transparency is the process by which you offer a suggestion and you explain why. Like explain your deeper motivations. Okay? It's manipulation if you feel like you're holding anything back that would help them change their mind. Like this idea that I'm giving you $100, but it's a fake $100. As long as in your world, I get to decide if you go forward and suffer damages. Okay, if I believe you're going to suffer damages by having a fake $100 where you try to spend it in the wrong place, or I could say, I don't care. I give you a fake $100. Whatever happens, you enjoy your life, and that's what happens.
Right.
There's a timeline in which you go and you spend $100. You don't have any problems. You just pass on a fake $100, but it just keeps going around until somebody comes up and identifies that it's a fake $100, but it's not yours. So in this way, you get to focus on exactly what you want to get. And if you want transparency from people, this is Leonara's suggestion, be transparent. Practice transparency with people. If you want people to be honest with you, be honest with them, even if it can mean you have a tough time. Sometimes that tough time, you know, you're just like, ooh, I put my foot in my mouth sort of thing. Courage is the boldness to say, you know what? I want to see this through. I want to get through this and get to the win-win at the end of this, because there's a win-win perception after every journey. And she says that's the reason to have courage at all. There's a win-win in every journey, and you know, follow your heart and you'll get there. If you don't, if you're hiding from your heart, you're hiding from what matters in your heart and your inner guidance system, it'll be a long journey before you get to that point.
Exactly.
All right. I think on that note,
yes.
I think we'll wrap up here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I think it's probably our most successful non-technical issue
show
at this point.
We had nothing.
That's great.
Good job.
Thank you. And I want to remind everybody that you can find me at julienwells.com. Of course, this will be on YouTube, so you'll probably be familiar with my YouTube channel at this point. And you can also join my Facebook public profile space where I give a lot of updates. But mostly you can join my my newsletter at julienwells.com and get some of the latest updates. I'm still working on it, but if you're subscribed before it starts to become a really useful tool for getting information out, go ahead, please. And of course, subscribe to my channel so you can keep up to date on when I'm going live. That really helps if I'm going to jump on live outside of the schedule of the show. And of course, give me a like so that I get bumped up on the search engines. That's
perfect. And also, if you have any ideas for research for Tranid, get them on Julien's page.
Yeah,
or
put them in the comments.
Tranid doesn't sleep, does he?
He sleeps about 2.5 hours on our schedule.
Okay, good.
For a 24-hour period.
I'm sure we can keep him busy.
Very cool. All right, everyone. Take
Thanks
care
so much, everybody.
And enjoy your weekend.
Good night.
Good night.